This is a segment you all need to pay attention to. Stop what you're doing. Please share this because it's happening under Americans' eyes right now, and your tax dollars are going to operate one of the largest child trafficking operations in the world. Child sex trafficking, child slavery in the United States is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the government is facilitating it. I know it might be hard to swallow, but we have multiple whistleblowers here on the show exposing this, and we have one today. Deborah White is a former HHS whistleblower who watched this all unfold and learned how this operation is happening to this day. And Deborah, we'd love to welcome you to Redacted. Thank you so much for your bravery and shining a light on this horrific story.
Thank you so much, Clayton. I appreciate you having me on and just providing a platform just to let the American people know exactly what's going on in the government. So thank you.
So absolutely. So this is happening right now. Before we get into your story, how bad is it? Americans are sitting there, going to their jobs, they're taking care of their families, putting food on the table. And I think most Americans can almost kind of compartmentalize this story. Like, this can't possibly be happening in the United States. Is it happening, and how bad is it?
Yeah, Clayton, I was one of those Americans. When I signed up to go and help Health and Human Services, Office of Refugee Resettlement Program under the Administration for Children and Families, I had no idea. I had no idea. I mean, sure, I'm not totally ignorant that, bad people exist and they exploit, systems, things like that. But I would have never in my wildest dreams imagined that when I signed up to go help reunite children with their families, what I would actually uncover at the site that I was at. It's bad. It's rampant. So from my perspective, almost every single case that I was dealing with was a case of trafficking at the site. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but that's because the cases that were coming to me were actually the trouble cases. So because it's, I guess, to answer the question, it's really bad. It's really rampant. I was at one of maybe 15 sites that were operating in the summer of 2021 because of the influx of children that are coming across the border. And the reason there's such an influx is because, there's an entire trafficking network, that happens, in country. A majority of the kids that we were seeing were from Guatemala. And those children, the vast majority of them were being trafficked, labor trafficked into the country, other worse forms of trafficking as well, sex trafficking. But many of the cases that I came across were definitely labor trafficking. Children knew that they were coming to the United States to work, to pay back the debt that they owed to the cartel, and send money home. But this is the story that the traffickers paint for the picture they paint for these children, that they're going to have, this wonderful life and these opportunities that are just wonderful in the United States. And then when they come here, they don't realize they're actually slaves, and they're actually forced to stay and work 7 days a week, at different locations. And so, again, to just try to recap the question, it's rampant. It's happening across multiple sites. We were in touch with sites, in Pecos, Texas, Fort Bliss, Texas. I was in Pomona, California. That was the site that I was assigned to for 4 months. And so as I queried the system, and the government system of record, which is the UAC portal, I found that, in a particular case, that we found, the first case I found on the site, which was 2 children that were going to Bonita Springs, Florida, that the actual household member had about 16 other children. So I brought it to the attention of the administration there on site, and, they acted like
16 other
yes.
children.
Yes.
I mean, an absolute red flag. These are not his children.
Not his children. So once they figured out that I figured this out, they said, "Hey, well, how did you do this? How did you locate this?" I mean, the leadership there acted like they were extremely shocked, as if they'd never seen trafficking through their program, And so I showed them. I said, "Here's how I queried the system. Here's how I figured out this household member is actually attached to these, 6 different properties that have multiple children at each of these sites." And I noticed that some of the children that had aged out, maybe he had recruited those children, 2, 3, 4 years ago, those now adults were recruiting children as well. So now they were now sponsors. And so it's like a network. So once these kids age out, they start then recruiting children from Guatemala and keeping them under their care.
So for the ignorant, myself included, on how this process works, this individual who has 16 children and now these kids who become adults and they start networking these children. I mean, they're brainwashed, right? So they're part of this
Yeah.
process. They're sort of brainwashed, and it's almost like Stockholm syndrome. And they're recruiting children then coming up from Guatemala. They're pretending to be relatives, right? They're pretending to be an uncle,
Yes.
a grandfather, etc. And they're funneling these children into the United States through a systemic program.
Yes.
And the United States is involved in this program. I mean, they're not just sitting back sort of facilitating, just watching this happen. They're actively involved in this sort of Guatemala, Honduras process right into the United States, correct?
Yeah, I mean, they're providing the door. The door's wide open. These kids know, the traffickers know, and then the kids then know. The process is, hey, we'll get you up to the border. You just run over there, and Border Patrol is going to have to let you in, and then the government will take it from there, and they'll make sure that you get to that address that we gave you. And so they provide.
So they're facilitating the transportation. They're even giving them airline flights. In fact, this morning, as you and I are speaking, it's been reported, according to multiple sources, that the TSA has created separate lines at the airport so that Americans when we go to the airport, we have to show ID to get through, to get on a plane, right? We even have to take off our shoes, for crying out loud. We have to take laptops out of our bags. The TSA has now created a separate line at the airport for illegal immigrants where they don't have to show identification. And they're being ferried across the United States, government funded by the Biden administration, and transported to houses. They don't have to show identification. Plus, they're giving them multiple thousands of dollars per month in a stipend in order to live.
Yes.
And this is happening.
This is happening. And yeah, unfortunately, the IDs of the sponsors, we don't even know that they're valid. And you know why? We never actually see the sponsor face to face. We have the ability, we can do video calls. All of the case managers have phones that have the ability to do video call. As a matter of fact, the entire process is done through WhatsApp. So the sponsor sends identification, quote unquote identification that's theirs. But again, you never know because you've never seen their face. The same sponsor could be sending you identification for 15 different people and you would never know it. You would never know that it's the same person because again, they're doing it at different sites. They know the process. They do it at different sites, different case managers, requesting kids from across the country. It's not just one place. And the government ID that they're giving you is typically a Guatemalan or Honduran issued ID. And it can be expired up to 2 years. The instructions that we received were to accept any ID given to you, even expired 2 years. And these are not US IDs. These are IDs from in country, and a lot of them were expired. And in some cases, they were giving us copies of an ID, like it wasn't even the actual ID. You would have to accept a copy of the ID.
What did they say? What did HHS say when you alerted them to the child trafficking that was funneling right through your office?
Yeah. So, I mean, initially the leadership there said, oh, we're shocked. Oh my gosh, what's going on? I mean, they acted like they'd never seen it, like they'd never seen trafficking through their program. And we know that they've been doing this for years and years. We know that there have been congressional hearings in 2015 and 2018 that have, called out HHS, ORR program, Office of Refugee Resettlement program, to say, what's going on? We know that you're trafficking. In I think it was in 2015 or 2015, I believe, they found kids, in Marion, Ohio, that were living on egg farms. So they absolutely know that trafficking goes on through their program, but there's no training whatsoever to tell you how to.
And where are these?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, right. So there's nothing there to red flag this and to run it up. There's no protocols in place, and there's no sort of follow up. You received a letter saying, "Hey, Thanks for alerting us," and that's it. Right. And it's continued, and it's gotten worse since then, right?
It has, because when trafficking was identified, at least that first case, and cases afterwards, because we had multiple dozens. Once it was identified, the child was then, transferred to another facility. This particular boy, Antonio, that I remember. I mean, I pray for him at night. He went to another facility, but then they eventually released him. So what happens is they act like they're saving the kid, like they're sending them to a different facility that they say that can handle, more long-term care. But then when you call to find out, what's going on with that kid, you find out that he was released anyways. So he was sent to the location that he wasn't supposed to go to. And then once the administration there found out that we were making phone calls and, checking up on the child that had been transferred to another facility, They then told us, they said, we appreciate that you care about the children, but you are not to make phone calls to any other facilities to try to find out what's going on. You just need to process the
What?
children that are your cases in front of you, and you need to stop worrying about that. And the other thing is, when we knew there were fraudulent birth certificates, we would call the consulate to try to figure out, hey, is this a valid birth certificate or not? We got scolded by the leadership administration. They came in and said, that is not your job. They said, you are not here to investigate the sponsor. You are here to reunite the children with their sponsor, and that is your job. You are not to investigate the sponsor. They said that's our responsibility, and we will notify the consulate if we believe that there's fraudulent birth certificates being passed through the site.
Do you know of any incidents where someone has flagged a fraudulent birth certificate and someone was prosecuted and or arrested?
No, not at all.
So they're doing a great job.
Right.
So you're looking into it. You're noticing that this is fraudulent.
Yes.
You're calling up to find out the welfare and safety of these children, and you're scolded.
Yes.
Don't ask questions.
No.
Your job is done.
That's right. That's right. The goal there was us to process the children within 10 to 14 days. And if we couldn't get it done in 10 to 14 days, then they would take the case from us and they would give it to a person that was on the strike team. The strike team, those would typically happen on Saturdays and Sundays when the case managers may not be on site. And then they would process the children. So this strike team member would then make sure that they got the child out of there within 24 to 48 hours because we were taking too long with the cases.
So these children, they're in the United States. They're working at egg farms and chicken farms and strawberry farms, and they're being, it seems like this labor is in incredible demand. That's why it's such a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry. It seems like the Biden administration wants to keep these borders open and flowing because this labor is so incredibly important to these companies and these businesses. They're all friends of the Biden administration. They're big donors to the Democratic Party, et cetera, and frankly, to the Republican Party. That's why under multiple administrations, nothing seems to happen here, that these borders are wide open and these children are being put into slavery positions in the United States so that cheap labor can flourish. Am I wrong?
That's absolutely correct. It's modern day slavery. These children are enslaved and they're in factories. There's one case in Virginia, I think it was a Tyson, I don't want to say the wrong company, but it was a chicken farm. And the child had his arm severed off, from the shoulder down, severed off in a machine. Thankfully, he was medevaced, and they asked, how old is this worker, and everyone was really, shocked. I think this was the New York Times that did a piece on this. And, they had to say, hey, he was 15 or 16 years old. And, but nothing happens. I mean, the plants continue to operate with children. It's just a travesty,
Right.
but there is a demand, and that's why it keeps happening. And that's why they don't shut the border down, because if you shut down the border, there's no more border problem, but they won't. They continue to allow it to happen, even though they know that there's modern day slavery happening, right through America's borders.
Well, sources have told me that, ICE, they know when ICE is going to show up on a particular day at a chicken farm in Atlanta or Georgia or somewhere else. And individuals are rounded up and then they look the other way, and then new individuals arrive the very next day. That this is part of the process. It's sort of the look over the shoulder. This is part of the process. So until we get some major change in government throwing out these deep state creeps who are allowing this to flourish, this is not going to change
100%.
because
Absolutely.
they're really, really troubling. Well, I could talk more deeply about this, but I just wanted to give sort of an overview for our audience, and we can dive more deeply at a later date, Deborah. But
Sure.
thank you for your bravery, bringing this to the attention of the American people. What can people do? People who are watching right now who have compartmentalized this type of story and are moving on with their lives, what can American people do? You're out there trying to draw attention to this. What can we do to stop this?
Yeah. That's a great question, Clayton. And it's one that we've been working on as a team. There's 5 of us whistleblowers that work together, that have seen it from different perspectives. We have one DHS whistleblower who has seen, gang members, MS-13, requesting children. We have one whistleblower, that we know worked the transportation side of it, who has witnessed children, babies in Texas at a Walmart, like thousands of babies under a year old at facilities. And so the magnitude of this travesty, I mean, I cannot even describe how horrendous it is, and how horrendous it is for the children that have to live it, because they don't realize what they're getting into. They don't realize they're coming here to be slaves. They do not know that. And I mean, it's just abhorrent what's happening. But the American people, can say, hey, we know about these whistleblowers who have come forward. You can mention us by name. Many congressional staffers, know us. We're working with congressional staffers now. Senator Grassley's office is doing an amazing job of addressing, this issue. Just recently, I think it was this past Monday, the Washington Examiner dropped a piece about Senator Grassley's office actually sending a memo out to Health and Human Services, Office of Refugee Resettlement, and with 38 other senators, so 39 senators in total, sent this letter stating that, HHS cannot do a rule change that they're trying to do right now that would make it easier to traffic the children by not requesting, certain identification processes, paperwork, by making sure that HHS employees cannot report outside of Health and Human Services without their express permission. And so Senator Grassley's office has sent a memo to ensure that that rule change that was in the Federal Register cannot be made into law, because what HHS ORR program was trying to do is bypass, the congressional process and do an administrative change through the Federal Register. And so we did a campaign and got about 66,000 signatures from the American people to ensure that this rule change would not go into effect. So contact your senator's office, mention us by name: Deborah White, Tara Rodas, Carlos Arellano, and Aaron Stevenson, and Myra Moreno. That's the 5 of us who are, doing podcasts, a couple nights a week, just trying to get the word out. So please contact your senators and let them know that, you won't stand for this, and you will not stand by and just have your taxpayer dollars go towards government-sponsored trafficking.
Yeah, please share this interview. Take this YouTube clip, this Rumble clip, and just share it with your member of Congress and tell them to watch this right now. So, Deborah, we thank you for your bravery in this. We thank you for everything you're doing to get the word out about this and all the work and messaging. I know it's an uphill battle, especially when you've got big tech censorship that's really suppressing this story as much as they can. They don't like it. We saw that with the movie The Sound of Freedom. We saw the suppression about this story. They make a lot of money off of child trafficking, and they do not want us exposing it. Deborah, thank you for your work on this.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.